Hello, I am Peter, a Project Essence member and RocketTalk host. This episode will be about JAXA, or the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. Buckle in. What is JAXA's history? The history of JAXA began in 1955 with the Pencil rocket launch experiment at the University of Tokyo. At this time, JAXA was non-existent, and the current aerospace agency that launched Pencil was called ISAS, which stands for the Institute of Space and Aeronautical Science, and which was founded in 1964, 9 years after the launch of the first sounding rocket. Japan's first artificial satellite was put into orbit by a larger rocket called the L4S, using a solid propellant. Since then, ISAS has been slowly evolving their launch vehicles and their research capabilities to the space agency whom we know of today as JAXA. On the topic of evolving one's research, JAXA have a manned space program. The answer is yes. Various Japanese astronauts have stayed on the ISS to perform experiments and such. They also built the Japanese science module, which was delivered to the space station, called Kerbal. Kerbal, the only science lab in existence which has pressurized interior where you can physically place an experiment on a tray, and then you push it out into an airlock. The airlock depressurizes, and then you have your experiment touched minutes before exposed to the cold vacuum of space. So that's pretty cool. So how did they loft Kerbal into space in the first place? Well, they have a fully functional fleet of rockets. The latest of these being Epsilon, which is a small sat launcher. It's a completely solid fuel rocket, meaning that the fuels it uses are in a solid state instead of a liquid state, as many other rockets use, and it can lift 1,200 kilograms to low Earth orbit, which is definitely a couple, maybe one or two small satellites. Definitely nothing big like the geostationary satellites, or the satellites that stay geostationary orbit. Geostationary orbit is where the orbital speed of the circling object is continually hovering over a single point on Earth. For example, if a satellite is launched into a geostationary orbit above America, for example, it will stay above America as Earth rotates forever. Supposedly, if the guidance and all is correct. But anyway, moving on to geostationary satellites, the H-2B vehicle that the Japanese use is a geostationary satellite launcher. That means, as I explained, launches geostationary satellites into orbit. The reason it requires a special rocket is because the second stage has to be much larger, has to be very large in comparison to most second stages, or in comparison to the first stage. So a H-2B can loft 16 tons into low Earth orbit, 13 times as much tonnage as the Epsilon rocket. This rocket, H-2B, launched the Kerbal module to the space station as well. And it also launches resupply vehicles to the space station. These resupply vehicles are called HTVs, or H2 transfer vehicle. They're basically really big cargo vessels. Each one is roughly the size of a bus. So these are pretty big, pretty interesting. Alright then. Now, in JAXA, there's a couple different operations going on right now. The biggest one that has been making the most news is called Hayabusa 2, and it is right now currently orbiting Raguru, the asteroid Raguru. It is a asteroid probe mission sent by JAXA a couple of years ago to this asteroid, and it has arrived last year around September, the end of September, and ever since then it's been making many different headlines. For example, it will map the surface of Raguru more than any other probe previously, except for OSIRIS-REx, which will in the future map the asteroid that it's orbiting, Bennu, more extensively than this, but that's another topic for another day. So, a couple of experiments on Hayabusa 2 include an artificial impactor where an explosive bolt on the spacecraft will fire, and then a projectile will shoot out and hit the surface and create a impact crater. Then, over the course of a couple weeks, the Hayabusa will come lower and lower until it can sample from the impact crater and then send back the sample case to Earth, much like OSIRIS-REx will do. In fact, I believe Hayabusa 2 would technically be is much more interesting than OSIRIS-REx, because we get to the rover parts. There are 5 rovers on board this ship. They are creatively called Minerva 2-1, Minerva 2-2. Then Minerva 2-2 carries the rover 2, and Minerva 2-1 carries rovers 1A and 1B. Quite a mouthful, if I dare say so myself. Each rover uses a special mechanism to rove around the asteroid. Basically, the idea is that each of these rovers, they're not at all aerodynamic. They're basically boxes. But inside each box are these mechanical arms with a weight at the end. And they swing these arms, and it propels as the center of mass shifts dramatically, the rover will just pick itself up and then move a couple of feet along its path. Really simple, but really cool as well. Minerva 2-1 has successfully deployed both of its 2 rovers, and both are on operation presently. Unfortunately, the deployment of the Minerva 2 will be delayed until sometime this year. Cross my fingers that it will be early this year. So, Hayabusa 2, the spacecraft carrier, as I like to say, also has an interesting past, because there was a Hayabusa 1 spacecraft which visited another asteroid, and Hayabusa 1 failed in its rover deployments. Both of them ended up in deep space, so it's really good to see that Hayabusa 2 has landed its rover successfully, so a thumbs up for that. Hayabusa 2 is still an ongoing mission. I suggest you check out the JAXA homepage to find more, and any local space news sources, such as Scott Manley or Everyday Astronaut, who do more information on this subject. Now, JAXA has a mission to be launched in the near future. It's called SLIM. SLIM stands for Smart Lander for Investigating the Moon. This mission will be a demonstration of the accurate lunar landing techniques embodied in a small explorer and accelerate the study of the moon and other planets using the Lighter Exploration System, a quote from JAXA. That is going to be very interesting, because basically it means that it will practice pinpoint landings. Our last attempt at pinpoint landings would have been Apollo 16, where we tried to land right next to a previous probe that landed on the American probe that landed on the surface. So this will be really interesting and vital for expansion throughout the solar system, simply because you have to land multiple vehicles in roughly the same area in order to get some sort of base set up. Anyway, that is what to look out for in the coming years. SLIM is going to be pretty interesting. It's the main project waiting in the wings. And I bid you all a fond farewell. If you want to support Project Essence, please comment, share, and subscribe to see when our latest episodes are released. You can check down in the description to see how else you can support us, either via following us on Twitter or Facebook, or joining our public Discord server. Feel free to support us, guys, and I wish you all a good day.